Hello, strangers. But it's funny, because you look kind of familiar. This is story number 53.
It was a night like many we'd had before. I and some friends from work, along with the guest cast of their significant others, were doing a little bar crawl. My group was solid, all from a running hobbyists group. Slogan, drinkers with a running problem. At its peak, there were at least 15 of us. We rolled deep for a bunch of drunk runners. Pictures from that night show a group of happy, glazed-eyed kids in their 20s, doing such amazing and innovative poses as piggyback riding, swinging around on streetlight poles, dancing and throwing out funny faces to the camera. But as the night continued on, people peeled off to go home and prepare for the real bill of the evening to come, the hangover. By the second to last bar, we were 9 strong. There were 2 couples of 2, one guy, Dimitri, in a long-distance relationship, and the rest of us were single or unattached to anything serious. Though, at least 2 were nursing crushes like the drink at last call. Jesse had a thing for a guy who hadn't shown up that night, and Pete, he had a thing for Jesse. I don't know if he'd shot his shot with her. Group dynamics can play a huge risk factor in that kind of thing. Like, you're risking hurt feelings, rejection, the inevitable taking of sides. Would he have risked casually being left out on future bar crawls by forcing the issue? Nah. Pete loved the group, loved to party. Up to that point, I just assumed he kept himself in check so as not to disrupt the delicate social balance and maintain his role in the group as a confirmed and incorrigible bachelor. But that's the thing about alcohol. Forget spy movie truth serum. I'm a firm believer that if you really want to know what a person's like, what's really going on with them, shooting tequila is a reliable way to find out. At that second to last bar, that's just what happened. We'd been dancing, well, moving with the loud music, but nothing like you'd see in a Bollywood production. I guess the liquid courage in him had Pete dancing up on Jessie. She was cool with it the first time I looked, but the next time I glanced out over the crowd, something had changed. She was static in place on the dance floor, a still body against a background of writhing couples. Her hands were up, palms out, in a fending off kind of pose. She was speaking, saying something to Pete. It was far too loud to hear a word, so I had to rely on the dim club lights. Even in the crappy light, there was a clear look of disgust on her face. She looked pissed. Pete was also static now. He had his hands down at his sides and his gaze pinned to the floor. Whatever it was that had happened, he wasn't trying to defend himself or argue back. I glanced away, feeling like I'd snooped on a moment that didn't require my awareness, like peeking into someone's underwear drawer. At least, I looked away for a 10 count before the drink in me urged another peek. When I did, I just caught Jessie turning on her heel and departing the dance floor with a snapped rigidness that sent her sweat-clumped red bob haircut swinging. I made my own way off the dance floor, following and catching up to Jessie. She wasn't having fun, and I needed to know why. Fix it, so my friend Jessie could return to having fun like we'd been doing all night. She'd returned to the bar, but off to the side, away from where kids clamored at the bartender for more lemon drops or whatever. When I approached and tapped her shoulder, she wheeled around at my touch. Her face was mad, scary mad. I stumbled back like her look had landed a punch on me. She saw it was me, and the look softened at once. Still a little drunk, still a little alarmed, I asked her what happened. Was she okay? She told me that Pete had sneakily moved from his first joining her in a dance in a friendly way to straight up trying to grope her. He'd ground his body up against hers. When he'd pressed himself firmly against her back, holding her there with his arms around her body, well, part of his anatomy had been hard against the small of her back, making his thoughts and intentions very clear in the blurry haze of the night's drinks. Jessie told me she was stepping outside for some air, wanting a bit of space. I didn't follow her. Instead, that golden retriever in all of us that pops out when we're buzzed and insistently wants us to fix it so everyone's happy again, told me I needed to go figure out what the hell had gotten into Pete. I went on the hunt, finally locating him on the other end of the bar. He'd bought a round for everyone and was smiling, acting like everything was A-okay. I was surprised. Pete was what my mom called a fretter. He seemed to take rejection, criticism, even some compliments pretty hard. But as I took the offered drinks into my hands and looked at him, his face remained placid, happy. It was like he'd taken Jessie's hard pass like it was nothing. Except, there was something about that smile. It didn't quite reach his eyes. It was like he'd taken two selfies, one of him smiling and one of him serious, and just cut them in half and pieced the two together. A mismatched set of happy grin, serious eyes. Serious, sober eyes. Even as drunk as I was, I saw no mark of the glassy drunkenness in his. His eyes were dark, focused, paired with that sunny grin. Ugh, even half off my ass, I still got the creeps. Pete grabbed up the remaining drinks, and we made our way back to the table our group had claimed earlier. Upon delivering the load of drinks, he told me to go collect our group. I herded them back like drunken cats back to our table, and we all took the shots, many followed by slurred, "Thanks, Pete," gratitude. The only two people who didn't take shots were Jessie and one of my friend's wives, who was DDing for us with the family van. Pete saw and asked why, but they both begged off, the wife for driving, and Jessie for needing to be somewhat alive the next morning. Pete said no problem, his mistake, and returned to the bar to get a couple Diet Cokes for them instead. We stayed on at this bar a while longer. Some of our number exited to the street to smoke. A few returned to the dance floor, and so on. I was one of the dancers, and when I got back to the table, I was a sweaty mess, craving anything cold and wet to drink. Jessie was still there, but she was putting on her coat. When she saw me surveying the table, she pushed her Diet Coke, which she'd drinking so little of it looked untouched, my way. I took it gratefully and downed it, then got my stuff, and we remaining few headed across the street and catty corner to the last bar of the night. As we found a spot in the half-empty bar, a casual one with a surfer shack ocean theme and a ton of low-sprung lounge sofas and wicker chairs, I saw Pete head back out for a smoke. His eerie face from before was still bugging me, so non-smoker though I was, I joined him. Now, drunk me, still happy golden retriever me, was in high gear. But person me knew I should probably say something about how hard he'd come on to Jess, pun not intended. I loved our group of friends, and some unfinished stuff like this could really mess it all up, if it wasn't nipped in the bud early. So, with many platitudes, I tried to kindly talk to him about it, how I'd been shot down before, how it sucks to like a person who doesn't like you back. He stood there, smoking, looking down at his feet, I went on. I said something along the lines of he just needed to let her know he was cool with just being friends. I was trying to just get across to him that he needed to tell her he got it, or she would feel weird about it, that she'd always be on the lookout for another attempt. But that's when he looked up at me, and even in the blurry, drunken haze, I remember what he said. The smile was gone, and he told me, "She does flirt with me, you know, so how sure are you that it's not just a girl playing hard to get? They all do that." My brain stumbled back a step as I considered this, but I immediately thought about her face, etched in disgust. It completely conflicted with the well maybe doubt that Pete was trying to bring. I looked into his eyes, trying to suss out some sort of response. I have no idea how gone I was, but I locked into eye contact with him, and the thought I had was that his eyes looked impossibly dark. The pupils were blown, max dilation, and the fevered, twitchy fraughtness of them made them look predatory. Pete's gone shark-eyed was one of my last coherent thoughts, because from there, it all got very blurry. I'd describe it like a video someone took on their phone, filming a coffee table full of Polaroids. There's all this whipping around, and then the camera focuses on one photo, one shot, before returning to a blur as they move the camera. They won't let you focus on any one thing. I remember we were back in the bar. Pete was looking at Jessie, frowning. Jessie was telling a story about growing up in the sticks and learning to drive on an old work truck. Her face is alive. She speaks with her hands, showing us how she learned to shift on the truck. Then, a blur. My buddy's wife, the DD, is wiping my face with something cold. I'm watching my feet tripping on the sidewalk. Then we're back in the bar. Jessie's there again, talking to Dimitri. She must still be telling the driving story. She's showing us how to shift, I think, moving her hands. Blur again. I'm on the floor. I remember thinking, man, do all bars have such ugly ceilings? I wonder how many people have ever looked at them. Blur. I'm not on the ground. Jessie is going to tell us a story of how she learned to drive. I'm looking at Pete. Pete's looking at her. We should take him to the hospital, I hear someone say. Blur. Jessie shows us how to shift into reverse. Blur. Jessie's mouth is moving, but somebody else's voice comes out. He doesn't look normal plastered. How much did he drink? No, we don't need to find Pete. He took an Uber. I find this word, Uber, hilarious. Blur. The ceiling is bright white now. Uber, I tell it. A final blur. Jessie leaning over. Ben, are you okay? Pete's gone shark-eyed, I tell her. And then it's dark. It is as though the black box of my brain quietly clicked off. The keys are in the ignition, but the driver's seat is empty. Light. There's a woman. She's wearing hospital scrubs in aqua blue. I ask her what day it is. My throat feels like gravel. It's Saturday, the next day. It's 3 p.m. While I was out, it appears my body had an adventure because I'm in a hospital bed. I found out what happened from a stern-faced doctor. The white-ceilinged place was the emergency room. My friends had brought me in around 2 a.m. I'd been vomiting and so out of it that they suspected alcohol poisoning. I was confused. Sure, I'd had a buzz on, but I'd had 4 drinks total, including the shot that everyone else took. As a bigger guy who's hit last call on many occasions, there simply was no way I could have gotten that drunk. To which the doctor agreed. and told me that, per some tests, it was instead the healthy dose of GHB that had blacked out my windows, so to speak. That stunned me. GHB? Who on earth would have dosed a large, hairy dude with the drug most commonly involved in sexual assault? The doctor didn't have a test result to answer this second question. He mentioned the police would be by, as being drugged without my knowledge was a crime done to me, and thus the staff had reported it. My whole body ached, and as a nurse replaced my doctor, I mentioned this pain to her. She patted my hand, said something kind, and then sleep was taking me again. I slipped back into the black, falling into dark water. Jessie was still telling her story about driving the old work truck, and then nothing. I came to on Monday. While I had slept, my friends spoke with the police. They filled in the gaps that I couldn't. It became clear that everyone suspected Pete. What he'd tried out on the dance floor with Jessie hadn't gone unnoticed. My friend's wife, the sober DD, was able to attest to his growing more and more angry at the last bar. Full seethe by the time Jessie left the bar and I parted ways with reality. A few of my buds begrudgingly added their own awareness of Pete's tendency towards infatuation. Those who knew him before he joined our group spoke on how obsessive he'd gotten with girls, stuff I'd never picked up on before. It was hard to feel indignation or anything besides a steep, sudden chill when I realized that the likeliest place for me to have gotten dosed was Jessie's Diet Coke. I guess it was serious enough to go to court. At first, I heard that Pete was fighting the charges. There was a text from him sent around that two of my friends screenshot and sent to me. He was claiming that, among other insults about me and Jessie, she said he said, and how we'd have to drop it, just so long as no one said anything to the cops. To which, it was more of a he said, 10 other witnesses agreed when they said situation, but go off, I guess. And the DA apparently agreed and went forward with the charges. It came out that Pete ended up taking a plea deal. I'm saying I heard a lot, because that night at the bar, frankly, was the last time I ever saw him. Jessie's okay. My friends are a bit rattled, but they're okay too. But me, I'm angry and scared. You're meant to trust your friends. But that night, my friend Pete, for all intents and purposes, died. The night my soul left my body, what Pete actually was peeled out of him, shark eyes hunting for his prey, leaving the good friend I'd known, or thought I'd known, behind. That night, both of us were out cold on the floor, and only one of us ever got up again.
And that's story 53. Watch your drinks and watch your friends. You never know when one of them's going to have something in it you didn't expect. Like the video if you liked it, comment if you have something to say, and subscribe if you'd like a notification every Tuesday, and random holidays as decided by me. Instagram and email are in the description as always. And again I say, stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.